Hello and welcome. I am Kemuel Pascal and you are viewing One and One here on WESN Content Capital. Trinidad and Tobago, Guyana, with years of bilateral relations. As Guyana gets set to earn billions of dollars in revenue from its oil and gas sector, the Trinidad and Tobago government has made a strategic move in the appointment of Mr. Conran Enel to the position of High Commissioner to the Cooperative Republic of Guyana. In this episode of One and One, we are joined by His Excellency, Mr. Conrad Enel. Mr. Enel, hello and welcome to One and One.
Thank you so very much to you and all your listeners, and welcome from Guyana.
Yes, it's certainly our pleasure to have you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, how has it been for you thus far since your appointment right now?
The Trinidad and Tobago had a presence here before. Trinidad and Tobago has been present in Guyana for maybe about 2 years. So when I came in, there was some kind of representation taking place. As you know, we have a High Commission's office. We have members of staff. Prior to COVID, we had assigned staff to Guyana. And during COVID, they were very busy in dealing with the challenges of moving people between Guyana and Trinidad in circumstances where they didn't have documentation and a number of things that are associated with citizens who need help. We are and have been doing those things, and that has been the focus, I think, up until now, of what the High Commission is doing. With my appointment to Guyana, there's a different agenda. Guyana, as a result of being an oil and gas province, is very much involved in two very basic activities. The first activity, of course, is oil and gas. And with Exxon, it has focused on a particular way in which it would produce that oil and gas. They're using the African model, which is basically to have a floating ship out in the ocean and bring the product up, produce, sell, and get revenue from it. So that's happening insofar as that is concerned on one project. But Guyana's major focus has been on its role in CARICOM, in trying to create an agricultural processing capability for the Caribbean. In the conversations that we've been having so far at the level of CARICOM, what has become very evident is that the world food supply and our engagement in that food supply over the years is now at risk because countries are seeing that they cannot produce sufficient for the global market. They can provide for their local markets. And as we saw in the case of the vaccines, where we had money, but we really weren't able to negotiate and deal with those companies that were involved in producing vaccines, we are seeing a similar activity with our food supply. As a result of that, Guyana, Barbados, Trinidad, Suriname, Brazil in the first instance, have put together a plan in which Guyana is the chair, if you will. And what it seeks to do is simply to create production for CARICOM using Guyana's geographic area. As you know, Guyana has significant green spaces in its hinterland, and therefore it has the room and the wherewithal to do very massive kinds of agricultural production. At a recently concluded session that President Ali and Prime Minister Rowley hosted in Trinidad, there is an objective to reduce food imports by 2025 by, I think, $1.2 billion US. And that initiative basically is being pursued by Guyana. And there's a lot of work going on, a lot of things happening, a lot of activities taking place, a lot of renegotiations, negotiations, plans, capacity building, and those kind of things. So there's a lot of activity.
I would like just to interject on that particular point. You mentioned that there's a different agenda, because many people know you from being within the energy sector, being a former Minister of Energy and Energy Industries under the Patrick Manning-led government. So you mentioned that particular different agenda, which focuses really on food. But how are things looking on the energy side?
Well, just to add to your conversation, energy was one of those things that I had to do. At the second part of the term, remember, for the very first part, I was in finance. So I spent a significant amount of time in finance. And what finance allows you to do is to understand macroeconomic fundamentals, understand budget, understand revenue production, understand how it works, how it doesn't work, understand the issues of inflation and so on. So on the energy side, however, here's what the challenge for the globe is. At this point in time, Trinidad and Tobago is going through an energy transition phase where it has to move from gas to renewables, or green as we call it. There's a time frame for that. In the case of Trinidad and Tobago, therefore, Trinidad and Tobago has capacity, and Trinidad and Tobago has infrastructure. Guyana has reserves, access to product. The assignment that is currently underway is to look at Suriname, to look at Guyana, and to look at Trinidad and Tobago, bring the various strengths together and advise the governments on what would be the best way going forward in order for everybody to win. Building the infrastructure in Guyana is going to take 8 to 10 years minimum. But Trinidad and Tobago has infrastructure. Suriname, likewise. So if we can do what the Europeans have done or the Russians have done in CARICOM, which maybe is to build pipeline infrastructure from one country to the other one, and use the resources of one country that is currently available, then the time frame can in fact be cut by about 5 or 6 years. And therefore the conversation now is around how do we, as countries that have very significant assets and significant advantages, leverage that for the benefit of CARICOM. And those conversations are ongoing. They are not yet complete, but they are to have a draft position by the end of October, at which point in time that would be presented to Prime Minister Rowley and President Ali, and then further discussions will take place. Oh, and President Santupi, and then further discussions will take place on what is required to move forward.
So essentially, just based on your discussions, I mean, it's only been a couple of months since you have been in Guyana, but based on the discussions that you have been having with stakeholders, not just persons from Trinidad and Tobago in Guyana, but also those who are at the helm of the energy sector in Guyana, give us an idea of what some of those conversations and what we can expect to see in terms of that particular draft paper in October.
Well, I met with President Ali this week, and what he basically indicated is that there are a number of working groups who are involved in a number of these activities, and what we would do is we would see where they are, and we would come together very shortly to see what is required going forward. This didn't happen before simply because I have recently been assigned, and there are a number of other things that are going on. But the way it works is that the Trinidad government will have a team in place. The Guyana government has a team in place. They're technical teams. In the case of energy, for example, there are co-chairmen between our Minister of Energy and the equivalent of Guyana's Minister of Energy, with a technical team comprising of individuals in the ministry, as well as in our case in Trinidad, in NGC, National Energy, and in the case of Guyana, there is a working group that they have chaired by individuals with experience in energy. And those are the teams that are working together, coming together with the specific objective of understanding what is required going forward. Now, having said that, though, there are a number of Trinidad and Tobago companies that are doing business in Guyana. Many of the projects that you see either in construction or in energy services are in fact Trinidad companies. In some instances, they work for ExxonMobil through their international operations. But Trinidad has a very, very large presence in Guyana in its development agenda at this point in time. And President Ali makes the point that we've had a very long history and there is a lot of cooperation and goodwill, if you will, between both countries in trade and in cooperation activities. So that's going well.
AM Prime on WESN, the only place from 6 to 7:30 a.m. where you can get the most analytical and thorough interviews and regional reports.
The Barbados Labour Party, led by the Prime Minister Mia Amor-Motley, once again able to achieve a clean sweep in yesterday's general election.
I think a lot of people have underestimated the power of Tobago nationalism.
If the government is afraid to say it, I, Martin George, I am saying it this morning on your show, Andy, there will be no carnival before Ash Wednesday.
Grab a cup of coffee and start your day right watching AM Prime with Andy Johnson weekdays from 6 a.m. only on your content capital, WESN.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
Let your voice be heard. Call Madam Fix-It on WESN, the only place that effectively helps you with your woes. Having problems getting onto government agencies, water woes, NIS and pension problems, potholes, and much, much more. Call me, Madam Fix-It, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, right here on WESN. Let me fix it for you.
There's one particular point that you would have mentioned. You said this did not happen before in terms of the collaboration that we are now seeing within the energy sector between Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. Many people have said that it's simply too late. Although Guyana still has work to do in terms of getting their self in position, and what you mentioned can take about 8 to 10 years. However, with collaboration between Trinidad and Tobago and also with Suriname, this can be cut down to now about 5 to 6 years. Many people are wondering why did this not happen before, and why has Trinidad and Tobago only now waited to make such a strategic appointment in that of you to the High Commission Guyana to further talks in this particular area?
So I don't know the answer to those questions because those are policy issues. Those are questions for the government. However, I will say this. Trinidad finds itself at this point in time in a particular situation. And we have to operate on the basis of what is before us. Trinidad currently has extra capacity. And the extra capacity is as a result of things that happened in our upstream sector. The people that operate in our upstream sector, BPN, Shell, and EOG, in their normal business activity, would not have been able to produce for us the kinds of volumes that we require. Additionally, we had a discussion some time ago with Venezuela about gas that we have on the cross-border, on our cross-border. And had we the opportunity to monetize that gas, it would have allowed us to have some supply to deal with the petrochemical plants that we have. That didn't work. The United States basically stopped that. And therefore, in some of the decisions that were made by the companies, the expected results did not occur. While that was happening, Guyana announced that it had found oil, but the owners of those resources under contract is Exxon. So that Exxon is the one who is at this point in time operating similar to how BP operates in Trinidad. So there is no opportunity insofar as that is concerned with Trinidad and Tobago. Where the opportunity arises is in future development. Future development of fields for which product that we do not now have with our upstream, they may have, and we may be able in some instance or in an instance to basically intervene and use those products in our infrastructure. And Trinidad gets revenue and Guyana gets revenue as a result of it.
Certainly. Now let's look at the food sector. I know you mentioned food and agriculture. I know you mentioned that at the very start, but I kind of cut in there to get some answers on the side of energy itself. You mentioned that we're looking at cutting down our import bill by 2025. Apart from that, what else are we looking at in terms of collaborating in that particular market with not just Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, but the CARICOM at large?
Yeah, one of the things that we saw is that certain countries in CARICOM are doing very well on the agricultural side. They are producing products that can, in fact, be used in CARICOM. The biggest challenge has been the legislation and the interpretation by some of our customs people, our immigration people, insofar as those things are concerned. And in the last CARICOM meeting that was held in Trinidad, one of the deliverables, I think it was, that the CARICOM team, President Ali, Prime Minister Motley, Prime Minister Manning, Prime Minister Rowley, committed to was doing something beyond simply talking policy. What has happened in the past, and I think what we have suffered from, is policy interpretation by those who are charged with that responsibility. In other words, they had to say that we would like to do trade between countries, but the law says that you can't do it because there are these things which we interpreted to be so. So what is going to happen is the heads have put together a technical team to interpret for those who have to carry out the law exactly what they mean. And they're doing this against a background that this has been one of the challenges facing what they call the ability for products and services to move seamlessly between countries. The other issue that they discussed, they have tasked national helicopters and CAL, I think, to look at as part of the agenda, is the whole transportation issue. How do you transport goods and services throughout the Caribbean? In Trinidad and Tobago, we have infrastructure, we have port facilities, we have ships, and there's a conversation now about how does the private sector build capacity to ensure that the transportation of goods and services in the quantities that are required, in the timing that is required to reach the CARICOM market is something that is understood, and there's a team looking at that as it relates to those issues. There's one other piece that I think is important, and it's linked, because Brazil is playing a role in this as well. There's a relationship between Brazil and Guyana that is being pursued, where Brazilian product can get into Guyana and also get into CARICOM. So that is also being pursued. Plant is being set up. The there's a relationship between Barbados, Brazil, Guyana, where private sector interests have developed plant and machinery, and they're looking at the whole capability within that space. So things are happening.
Certainly. One thing I'd like to ask you, many people will say that here's what we understand what the challenges are, but it's a matter of implementation, because what you can possibly have is you being the High Commissioner now, you have Prime Minister Rowley at the helm, you have Dr. Mohamed Ufan in Guyana, and also you have the President in Suriname. And all these things could be said and done, but then there's elections in the various territories, and you all change, and none of this is implemented. How can the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago be assured that these are things which will actually be implemented in terms of what you all are trying to achieve?
I think that there are some things that you can control and some things that you cannot control, and therefore you focus on those that you can control. The matter of who runs the country is a matter of choice for the electorate. Once they decide that this is what they want, the problems will not change. The fact that Trinidad and Tobago has a production curve that will not allow us to get maximum production will not change, because that is what it is. So whichever groups of individual basically are asked to run the various countries, the problems will still be there. And it is to the problems that we have to address ourselves. The fact of the matter is that if we do not have a plan, and we have another COVID outbreak, or we have another war in Ukraine, or we have a situation where Russia continues with its normal habit of shutting out countries based on its pipeline infrastructure, it means that the demand supply for goods and service globally will be affected. It means that we can get up one day and find out that we don't have food. That's a matter for government. So I don't think that governments have the choice at this point in time to wonder or to understand what will take place. If elections come and government changes, what will happen is possibly the rate at which the implementation will take place, or maybe the priorities may change, but the problems will continue. The fact of the matter is that we are in a situation where we have problems. You also have the other issue of the environment and what that kind of pressure is doing for countries. And here's one other piece to add to all of this. Even as the countries look to get revenue streams from the current opportunities, that window is going to close very shortly, because in 8 to 10 years, the world as we know it today will start to penalize those who are involved in the oil and gas business. At this point in time, Trinidad and Tobago has to start looking at, and we are looking at that, moving a lot of its current energy operations to have a component of green in it. So you should be hearing in Trinidad a lot of conversations about greening the sector. This means that for you to operate in global markets, you have to basically demonstrate that you are not adding to the current environmental issues, and that's a challenge. That creates, therefore, a window of opportunity for countries to maximize their revenue potential, after which investment for projects of that nature will go towards greener solar renewables. So there's also a time frame associated with implementation.
Your Excellency, do you think that we have waited too long on attempting to fix issues like these? Because, I mean, these are not new things.
Well, the answer to the question is you do the best that you can based on the information that you have. And in many instances, we are here today based on the information that we have today. Let's take the situation with Venezuela. As we speak today, there are conversations that are taking place. Dr. Rowley and Minister Young has gone to Washington to try to see if you get the Washington consensus to release for us those Venezuelan assets, so at least they can fit in the time frame. If they are successful, then that works. If they are not successful, they have to do something else. Those conversations are necessary, but they're also very complex. And with the difficult conversations. And even while that is taking place, you have the present challenge of managing what you have, and you have COVID. And if COVID, when you finish with COVID, you have monkeypox, and then you have a population in some instances that will not support you. In Trinidad and Tobago, we still have a situation where a significant part of the population is not vaccinated as we speak. That is their right. But what that does is that it creates challenges in the health system, and you have to put resources in the health system to make sure that they're okay. So one can pick out an issue and say, okay, we did this bad or we did this good. But I think you have to look at all of it. The other thing too is capacity. Where are you getting all the people that are required? One of the challenges we see in Guyana, for example, is as they move into fast-paced development, you don't have all the people that is required for the jobs that you are going to create or for the opportunities that are available. You just don't. So there's a significant gap that will occur very shortly where you need to have people. Right now, for example, we are seeing industries in Guyana that are basically saying we have to shut down because we just don't have the labor. We do not have the labor. We cannot get people. We're seeing that as well at this point in time. So there's a lot going on inside there, and there's a lot of realignment, readjustment that has to take place.
Because we are almost out of time, this is my last question to you. How soon can citizens look forward to seeing some of the things and hearing about some of the things that you would have mentioned in this interview?
I think that immediately, as soon as the report is completed on the way forward for energy, I think that Prime Minister Rowley again will advise on what that is. And I think that that will occur by the end of October, certainly. In terms of the agricultural issue, President Ali is going to speak to that. There is going to be a forum sometime soon, I think on the third leg of the agricultural program. And at that point in time, you will hear the progress that has been made. There's a reporting mechanism that goes into CARICOM so that whenever the CARICOM heads meet, the prime ministers who have responsibilities for various areas do in fact report. So I'm pretty sure that when that occurs, you will get big updates as they come out.
Well, Your Excellency, we do look forward to that. Thank you so very much for joining us on this episode of One and One.
Thank you so very much for inviting me, and feel free at any point in time to reach out. I will give you the benefit of whatever we have.
Certainly. Well, this has been One and One here on WESN. I am Kemuel Pascal. Thank you so very much for joining us.